Good evening. I'm Willie Vogt. I'm the editorial director at Pet and Farm Progress, and I welcome you to this special panel of Resistance Fighter of the Year winners. The program from Syngenta was introduced in 2009 as a way to recognize proactive managers of herbicide-resistant weeds, and since then it's been expanded to recognize advisors who also help growers manage disease, insects, and nematode resistance. Essentially, resistance is everywhere. Through opportunities for industry exposure and information sharing, this Resistance Fighter of the Year leadership program endeavors to help members enrich their careers and better serve their growers. And also there's an idea exchange, which is what we're about tonight. The application window for the 2014 program is open until September 15th, and those who wish to apply or recommend a worthy agricultural advisor should do so at resistancefighter.com. I'm excited today. We're doing a mid-year check on what's going on in the fields across the country. So I'm going to introduce the names of each panelist. When I introduce each of them, they'll give me a couple minutes about themselves and discuss a little bit about what they're doing, and then we'll get into our discussion. So I'm going to start to my right would be Joel Sprink from Two Rivers Cooperatives. He's a sales agronomist, and he's the 2013 Resistance Fighter of the Year. Joel, tell us a little bit about your business and what you're up to.
We're a small 4-location co-op in south central Iowa. Started seeing resistance a few years ago. 2012 would have been about the first year with water hemp. Starting to see a wider array of weeds show up. Working progressively with our growers and trying to fight the battle, and you know, we tell what's coming, what we're seeing, trying to get ahead of it.
Okay. Next to Joel is Jason Wyrick. He's the MFA Director of Agronomy. He's also the 2013 Resistance Fighter of the Year winner from Columbia, Missouri. Tell us about your business.
Well, we're a retail-operated cooperative based out of Columbia, Missouri. We serve 5 states. We're seeing a lot of range. I mean, we serve the southern part is in Boot Hill, Missouri, northeast Arkansas. You know, we're fighting palmer, cotton, and rice there. Crew up to our southern tier counties of Iowa, we're fighting, you know, water hemp, giant ragweed, and bear's tail, soybeans, and corn. I will tell you this year we're going to have some tremendous crops throughout our trade territory in Missouri, as well as for the most part into Iowa. But you know, the thing that really gets me is this year we've had very good luck controlling the weeds. We've gone to the two-pass system in corn and beans, and you know, we have plenty more this year, so the weeds are actively growing. You know, in the past we've gone with 2 shots of Cobra, and you know, very seldom had very good luck. This year it seemed like the one-pass system with Prefix or Cobra at the top did a dang good job, cleaned them up, and everything looks good.
That's good news. What are we going to talk about? No, I'm going to go on. To my left is Clint Einspar with Cargill Inc. He's a sales agronomist over Arapahoe, Nebraska. Tell us about your business.
I work in southwest Nebraska, northwest Kansas, mainly for Cargill. We're wide independent in Nebraska. We've faced a lot of issues from kochia to water hemp to mare's tail in our area. And so we've been fighting that for a lot of times, and what we're learning is we got to go out early and get the stuff before it even comes up in the spring. So we've been using a lot of Banville and a lot of heavy pre's. We also had good luck with the 2-pass system. But yeah, we've been using a lot. We've also attacked a lot of stuff in the fall, and we've had really good luck with going forward with that. So that's kind of what we've been doing in our area. So.
Great. And finally on the end, and last but not least, Steve Mullenbrook from Dallas Farmers Cooperative. He's the agronomy manager, the 2010 Resistance Fighter of the Year from Dallas, Iowa. What's it like in north central Iowa there?
North central Iowa, we've had a lot of rain. 3 weeks in June there, we didn't turn a wheel for 3 weeks. So if we didn't have freeze down, it would have been a real mess. But we're looking all right, other than ponds.
Ponds, yes. Saw some of those on the drive down to the Farm Progress Show. Speaking of weather, the Farm Progress Show today. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go through a little conversation up here. I have some topics I'm going to bring up. We will have an area for Q&A toward the end for the media in the room. They want to ask these guys some questions about some of the issues they're facing. If we don't cover it, please don't be afraid to ask as we open it up for that. All of you talked about pre's. Let's. Is the whole pre-discussion easy to bring to a customer? I'd like to talk. Steve, you want to start with that conversation?
It's getting easier. 85% of my customers now use pre. We've had disasters in the past, and you know, like I said, this year you put a pre down, and you can keep the weeds from even starting. That's huge. And now that you get them in that mode, especially after a year like this where you got a lot of ponds and rain. If you didn't have the pre down, they realize, you know, that we would have a real disaster out here. So yeah, it's getting easier.
You just got to keep reminding them.
Right. Especially when it's $15 in crack.
Now you're covering 5 states. Is the pre the best example for you in your part of the world, or I mean, is that an easy sale too, Jason?
That's the only option they have. So, look at our southern trade territory, they're chopping big weeds, and, the guys from the north, they look at that and they don't want to do that. So it's a very easy sale. What we've seen is farmers are reluctant to try until they've had a train wreck or problem on their farm. And that's what we've seen is these guys have had troubles in certain pockets of their farm, and these guys are doing it. I guess the biggest change probably from us, from some of you guys, is we're running full rates of freeze. We're not running setup rates. I don't know if y'all are or not as well, but we've gone to the full rates and using the full punch that we can out of those pre's.
So basically hitting them as hard as you can out of the chute rather than training them to be resistant.
Oh, that's correct. We're hitting them harder out of the chute, and then we're coming back on a time schedule. Ideally, we're coming back on a time schedule. Not everybody's on board with that yet. 3 to 4 weeks, and we're hitting that again with, with a prefix or a worn application to overlap that residuals out there. We're very fortunate in most of the states we work in. We have good weed scientists there promoting the same message. Our chemical companies are all out to promote the same message. So it helps us an easier sell for us, for our people at our locations to do that when you have a consistent message coming from the industry as well.
Joel, are they relying on you? Is the customer relying on you to pick and make sure you get your modes of action right, or your sites of action right when you're making those choices?
Yeah, a lot of the chemicals that we're using here, most farmers a few years ago didn't really know about them. Like Jason here, we're starting to use, last few years have been mostly just a setup rate of the pre, then coming back around to post. Starting to see, the issues starting to show up here in the last few years to where we moved to not a full rate of the pre, but more a heavier rate followed by another residual post. Now this is our first year in really putting that program out there in the fields. A lot of guys are hesitant. Lower commodity prices with higher costs on their weed control program. Now with the guys that didn't run those kind of programs, those are showing up in the country now, and the guys that made the decision to spend the money up front, they're seeing their wise investment now. They have clean fields where they're seeing the neighbors that get a little bit on the herbicide costs, and it's good to buy them in the end, and they're happy that they spent the money up front.
Taking a lot of pictures to post and show them later.
Driving by fields, had one customer that was very leery on wanting to spend the money. Drove by one field. I said, "Do you want your field to look like this?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, we need to do what's right then."
Wow. What about you? You've got kosher. That's a different resistant animal than what Jason's dealing with. How do you deal with that?
Different breed of cat. Well, we talk to our growers, and we do use full rates because there's nothing else to do but use full rates. We also promote a little bit of outside the box thinking, so we use multiple modes of action, and we may use 2 or 3 different companies together to get our modes of action that we want. I got some fields that we're using multiple of 5 to 6 modes of action out there with trying to get pre's out, and we're trying to go way in front of the planter. We found out with kochia, if you can get it in March, get in front of it with March, you can get 90% of it, and you really have better luck. And especially with soybeans, if you got one kochia plant in your soybean field, you can see it forever, and the guys want it dead, and that means there's 15 or 20 more out there that are going to be there in about 2 weeks, and so you don't have any choice but just to leave it. And with our mare's tail and our water hemp that comes, you can't put Cobra on it; it'll just burn it off. You can't add Cadet. You can't add those small micro packs that connect everything and try to clean it up. Once the kochia hardens off at about 6 inches, you're pretty well done, and you can spend a lot of money trying to chase down the kochia. So the best thing is to do is get it cleaned up front.
Now, your kochia is resistant to glyphosate, or what else?
We're seeing a little bit more resistance to dicamba, but it's pretty small pockets, and I'm not 100% sure it's totally resistant. A lot of it's just due to the fact that it's so hot and dry. We get low humidities, and we get lots of heat, and so once our humidities drop below about 30%, we don't have very good luck killing the kochia. So I'm not 100% sure where we go resistant. I think the kochia pretty much shuts down. We have a new, I don't know if it's a new style of dead in our kochia, but it'll get about 4 or 5 inches tall, and it'll just be green the rest of the year, and it won't do anything. Somebody called it zombie
kochia.
Zombie kochia, and we do see a lot of that, and we're very concerned about that because we weed-wise. So we use Normoxone. Your only choice is at that point is to get Normoxone and get it brown. So.
Wow. Now you were talking about pre's. Are you using full rates of pre's in that market, or how
Yeah, we use full rates, pre down early. We come back, post, tank mix, full rates. We do everything we can. I mean, it's tough to kill the water animal, especially this time of year. You'll see when you're driving around out here in Iowa now, things that are just starting to let loose a little bit. You'll see a water hemp here and here that was a clean field.
Yeah.
Mainly because of germination year round. It'll grow 3 inches a day.
I know. So it's almost like all that giant ragweed you see in your part of the country, isn't it,
Yeah.
Joel?
Yeah.
How are you dealing with that? That's resistant ragweed, isn't it?
Yeah.
What you see?
Yep. Seen a lot of guys, a couple years ago, ragweed would go down pretty easy after a Roundup application, and it looks like you got it. Go back a couple weeks later, and it's growing right back out of it again. And once you've done that, there's nothing, especially in a soybean field, there's nothing that you can go out there with. Saw quite a bit of stuff this year where guys went out really early with the pre, said there wasn't anything else up there. We just need to run the pre, Roundup or 2,4-D, $3 or $4 round or 2,4-D application when it cleaned up a lot of their giant ragweed that they didn't think was up already. They went back post with Cobra, and the stuff was 3 to 4 feet tall. Thought they had smoked it. You drive by the fields now, and all of a sudden it's sticking back above the canopy again. So
I don't think you're ever going to get a weed that's 3 to 4 feet tall.
No.
I could be wrong on that.
Yeah.
You guys can confirm for me if that's a good idea.
Well, that's the other part of the equation. I mean, the timing's huge.
Yep.
Especially on the post. You get a weed, like you said, that's 8-10 inches tall. It's tough to kill it. If it's down there 2-3 inches, you go early, you can get it.
Well, I think Joel brought up a good point that we don't want to miss is the fact we're going to start cleaning. If we look at giant ragweed, for example, it germinates, a high percentage of it germinates before May 15th. I mean, that's a proven fact from Iowa State, Missouri, wherever you're at. So the highest percentage of it germinates before we're even putting a lot of our crops on the ground. So that drives the fact that we need to start cleaning. And if we're not starting cleaning, these will name those weeds, they're going to be there all year.
That's right. If you have 2 that are this tall, an inch or 2 tall, and you get 2 inches of rain, you're not in there for a week, and with water in them.
Yeah.
3 inches a day, I'm telling you right now, you're 8 inches, and that's a big weed to handle. And if you're in beans, you don't have much choice but to try to tank mix what you can, and you're pretty much out of luck. Especially in our area where we're going to the west, because we have a lot more clay soils and a lot lower pH, so we can't use things that the east guys do because we can't flush our system and we go with a lot of wheat. So we're really limited on what we can do. We have to go full rates of freeze, otherwise we're just going to be out of luck.
Are you doing any fall burn down then to get yourself set up at all?
Yeah, we do a lot.
I'll talk about that.
We do a lot of fall treatments. Use a lot of bicep in the fall for corn. We use a lot of sonic and dual and things like that for soybeans. And then we'll follow those up with, we'll do full rates of those in the fall, and then we'll actually follow those up with half rates of other modes of action to try to get things cleaned up that break through. But those have been some of our best programs, especially when you have Maristale. If you don't clean some of that stuff up in the fall, you'll really deal with it all season. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. I promote, especially if you have Maristale, is a half rate of a pre in the fall with a bunch of 2,4-D and Vanville, and then I come back in the spring and put the rest on. And I still promote the 2,4-D and the Vanville a second shot out there to try to get that stuff cleaned up. Otherwise, you're gonna fall into a hole. So
You're buried in Maristale. I mean, besides Palmer and Waterham, how is fall your best approach to that?
Well, we've been dealing with fall applied chemistry for a long time in our trade territory. I guess one thing that we use a lot of it, we're doing it in certain areas. Something we have to be cautious of is soil loss, as I mentioned. The cover crops is a hot topic right now, and I'm not going to get into the soil health aspect of it. I'm going to talk about the soil, keeping the soil in this place. And fall applied chemistry does not allow us to have a cover crop out there in a lot of situations. So as far as fall applied or early spring applied, we're trying to get out there. In certain areas with a high erodible area, we're probably not doing a fall applied. We're promoting cover crop to preserve the soil, and that's it. But fall applied across our territory has been big for a while, and dicamba 2,4-D, canopy. You name it. Obviously, you name it.
and cover crops is a new breed of cat in our area. We've been getting some in our area pretty heavy here lately. The government made a program, a CSP program that comes out and promotes that, which is a good program, but that also limits you to what you can put on for pre's. Look at wheat residual herbicides. Ray becomes a really bad factor for wheat if you are planting a cover crop. So you need to really work with the growers to talk about, are you going to put a cover crop out in this field after you harvest the wheat off? Because if you are, you have to really think about what you're going to use. Otherwise, you're going to have a really good stand of no cover crop. And you've spent all that money to get nothing up, and because a lot of those herbicides, especially Ray, it does a really good job of holding things all the way through the spring and through the summer.
Now, I got to say one thing. I'm not bashful. Do not plant Italian ryegrass. Okay. Yeah, that's being pushed, by several government agencies as far as cover crop. Italian ryegrass is different than cereal rye.
Yeah.
It's a very good cover crop. Don't get me wrong. It has very good fiber roots and very good coverage. But if you look at the lowland species in general across the world, that's the #1 species for resistance to the multiple modes of action. So just be cautious of that for you guys out there.
Yeah, and there's ryegrass promoted. That makes me nervous.
It makes me too. Well, we deal with rye because if you plant wheat, there might be a bullet coming at you because if you have rye in your area, guess where it's going?
Yeah.
You'll see it. You might see it, and we do plan a little bit of it. But we put it with a plan behind it that we're going to get it killed before it heads out, and how many years of corn and beans are going to be behind it before it goes back to wheat, so that we have a plan in place, because that is the one thing that concerns me the most is we'll create resistance with the cover crops by just not very well taking care of them, cleaning them up and making sure they're dead. Cover crops can work really great where you get a good mat of cover crops, but you lose that one shot and have resistance weed through them, you're in real big trouble.
Don't need any more.
No.
No matter what. I'm thinking. What about cover crops in your area, Dallas? Is that catching on?
We've just played with it a little bit last fall and very few fields, so we haven't done a lot of cover crops. No, we're just mainly corn bean rotation, corn on corn. So other than maybe some fall applied 2,4-D, we don't do much in the fall either.
What about you, Jason? I mean, are you getting more down in that area?
Oh, yeah.
Missouri's pretty big in cover crops.
Cover crops is very big. We're seeing 5-way mixes. You're talking about clovers, you're talking about tillage rashes, you're talking about turnips, you're talking about cereal rye, you're talking about hemp. You're talking about 5-6-way mixes. We're putting out there, and they're coming to us for answers on, okay, what's this mix should look like? What's your goal in mind?
Yeah.
I don't want my neighbors doing it. I want to do it too. Or I'm getting $40, $50 from soil and water conservation, or whatever. I think we need to have a goal in what we're trying to do. Make sure we have a plan of fact, whether it's a weed control, herbicide program. I appreciate you doing that and talking about that, because that's very crucial for what we're trying to do as resistance fighters and weed control.
Yeah, and that's the first thing I ask my customers. What do you want the cover crop to do for you?
Yeah.
Because there's so many reasons and so many different options. If you don't know what you're going to want to do, if you just want to plant a cover crop, any person off the street can say a cover crop. I'll go back behind the deal, I'll open my vest and give you all the cover crops that you want.
Doesn't it sometimes look like that's what they bought, though?
Yeah.
When you see it in the field, it's like, what alley did you pick this stuff up?
Yeah. So, you have to have kind of a goal in mind, like you said, of what you want that cover crop to look like and what you want it to do, because if you don't, you can, number one, create yourself more resistance. Number two, you can really not establish anything, and you fail so miserably, and you've spent, some of those cover crop mixes get into the $30, $40 an acre thing, and you've spent all this money to get into, getting nothing out of it. So.
One thing that we talk about cover crops, and I mentioned red clover being in the mixes. That was probably my #1 phone call issue was clover and how we kill clover and soybeans. And we're talking about, water hemp and mare's tail and diuretic. Everybody kind of understands the fundamentals of that, but you go back to talking about clover, what we used to have to do in the past,
right,
and the issues, and it's a chance to become a weed as well.
That's right. What about mare's tail in your area, or how do you look at that from a cover crop standpoint?
From what we've seen, guys going out there with the cereal rye in late fall, it seems like it helps with quite a bit with suppression. Started to see some fields here the last few years. Guys, mostly in a no-till situation, go out early spring with the grapevines around us, so there's issues that we can't spray a Roundup or can't spray a 2,4-D or Banville product then, so we're going at high rates of Roundup with our freeze. The mare's tail is up already 4 or 5 inches tall by the time you go out there. You turn the top of it yellow, you go back a couple weeks later and it's growing back out of it. Or if a guy goes out there with tillage, dings it, doesn't get rid of it, instead of having one stem coming out of it, it has 6 or 7. Then come in the fall, it's about 4 or 5 feet tall. It has how many countless seeds on it. Some guys went back to fall chisel plowing to try to eliminate the issue. Saw some fields last year in soybeans where guys actually had to wait for it freeze to go out and get their beans because the meristem was so thick you couldn't see the soybeans spot. So in a lot of our no-till fields, we do have some winter annual pressures. Purple embed is one that we deal with a lot in certain areas. Going out there with a 2,4-D band-mill mix. We don't run very many pre's or any of the residuals in the fall in our area yet. It may come to that, but for the most part, we're a 2,4-D or band-mill product in the fall.
Trying to spur it off a little bit.
Yeah, yep.
You've already kind of told us a little bit. We're going to talk about two nested weeds. We're going to start with kochia over here because it's a western tree.
It is.
Essentially.
Yes.
I mean, you talked about a little bit before that it hardens off and you can't kill it. Now you've got zombie kochia.
Well, something like that.
But what's that? I mean, is that seeding then too? Is that zombie kochia got a seed?
Yeah, I think some of it does. Some of it doesn't. I think but it only takes that one plant to survive it, and then you have something that's more resistant to what you just put on. So that's your biggest concern. So we look at a lot of reasons why we need to go back and follow up with gramoxone for it. But anytime that I see those plants, I pull probably 80% of them. I've pulled so many plants this year in my hands. I'm surprised they're still not green. But that's something that we really are concerned about. And one thing about kochia is it'll come up throughout the season. It tends to come up really heavily in March, April, May, but you'll see some come up, especially after like wheat harvest. You'll see some come up, and it seems to be very determined on when it's going to pollinate. And then all of a sudden, you'll have a small plant, that doesn't have a lot of size to it, and it sheds itself with pollen, and you can't penetrate that. And so that's part of the issue that we see is we got really not very large plants seeding themselves and then rolling across your field. And that becomes more of an issue. So it's just important to understand that you got to get that stuff early. And one of the biggest reasons I think we're seeing a lot more resistance, especially from kochia, is because with the environment that we've lived in with the markets, we don't no longer leave strips through our fields. We plant fence to fence. And now we're forcing ourselves to kill the fence rows, the road ditches. We dig those. When you're in a corn bean rotation, you don't have that option of having a wheat crop there where you could put a grass herbicide across it and the grass might come through and the kochia would be held down. But we forced ourselves into a lot of corners where we're killing the ditches, and all that's coming up once the corn's 4 foot, 5 foot tall, here comes the kochia. And then it grows up, and we may have dinged it with a half rate of a pre, because how far in the ditch do you really want to stick the boom out to get a full rate into that road ditch? So that's I think that's big one of our things. I've been talking to my growers a lot about trying to just get out and mow some of the road ditches and mow some of their sides of their fields if they can. There's a lot of big mowers that are just little driving mowers that have a lot of horsepower and a lot of ability. So if you can get that in between your corn row and your fence, that isn't a bad thing every once in a while to go out there. But a lot of times we don't do that till really late, so the kochia's 6 foot tall and it's an impossible thing to do.
And I don't have a lawnmower like that.
I don't either. I can't use my little push mower.
No, that's not. So on the other side, we go east, we have pomerandra's, which is a whole different monster. You're dealing with that. Is in the pre-program is taking that out?
No, it's not taking it out. There's several factors that go into controlling palmer. It's the same simple approach. The overlap residuals starting clean, but what we're seeing is palmers germinating until after harvest. Right now, we're starting to cut corn in the boot heel in our northeast Arkansas stores, and we're talking about controlling the palmer pigweed after harvest. That's something you get north of 70, a little bit further south of 70. You don't have to worry about that. Frost is going to take care of it.
Right.
Well, down there they got to worry about it. I've seen palmer, 1 inch to 2 inches tall with a seed head on it. It's going to produce seed. Now, it's not the dramatic numbers that you hear on TV or you don't hear about, but they do produce seed. So it's the same simple approach. We still have people chopping. We're running 4 or 5 applications of cotton, trying to control it. We're using some Liberty Link, some white stripe cotton, and we're using that type of system down there, to try to control that.
Are you concerned about overuse of Liberty to create the same problem? I mean, that discussion's been had.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got guys calling in and say, well, you'll never believe how big a pigweed I got with 30 ounces of Liberty. I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I mean, they're talking taking down a 4-foot tall pigweed with Liberty. We don't have very many tools in our toolbox, and it's coming down the pipeline. It's great and dandy, but from a retailer standpoint, it scares the heck out of all of us up here, I'm sure. So, I mean, the Liberty is a great option if it's used right. 4 inches or less, the rule still applies. If it's taller than the barricade, you might need a spray. Or should have been out there 2 days ago.
Right.
3 days ago.
Still need to put the pre down.
Oh yeah, the best goal is never let them out of the ground.
Yeah,
You know, you go back 2 years ago or last year, we put out our pre's and we thought we was doing everything right. We didn't get ready to get them activated. Yeah. So we had a lot of troubles. If you don't get them activated by rain, the weeds can't take them out there before they come through the fire. So this year we were very fortunate and got ready to activate our pre's.
That would be good.
Now about the kochia.
Yes.
We was talking about this earlier. Where I grew up in southeast Colorado, we bail that up and feed it to our cows, and cattle love it, so we can start growing as a crop.
Yeah, we could. That's part of the reason it's here. So thanks for whoever did that. But yeah, that's what I tell my guys that have alfalfa. What about the kochia and alfalfa? Just bail it up. It's great. So,
Good fiber, good protein. Yeah, it's really good. Well, let's shift out of resistant weeds for a little bit and talk about disease. It's been wet. We've been, what's the disease picture? Let's start in north central Iowa. What have you guys been seeing?
Seeing a little bit of fungus growing on in the corn. Nothing serious this year because we were wet earlier and then we kind of got dry until today, naturally. Anyway, I mean, we're doing quite a bit of fungicides on corn and bean both anymore here just because there are diseases. Right now you're seeing some sudden death and a few other things out there, but it's north central. It's not real heavy this year.
Do you think the fungicide conversation is going to be harder to have with $3 corn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't want to spend the extra money to do it. Lately, we've been doing a lot of corn B5 early. It seems like it's easier to make the sale to them when it's B5 when it's standing there 8 foot tall, and we're not putting any more into it. It looks good, but they don't see the disease out there unless. So we've been doing a lot more of B5. And a good grower will realize the benefit from that. And some of the other guys, you kind of got to talk them into it.
What about Joel, in your part of the world? What have you seen for diseases, if at all?
I'm starting to see a lot of sudden death the last week to 10 days, but with just small patches. Certain fields, the majority of the fields now. Had a lot of phone calls. Had one today. Guy asked me, hey, have you been down the river by me yet? I said, no, but I guess if you're getting ready to ask me, you probably haven't seen sudden death. That's exactly what I'm seeing. And this year doesn't seem to matter. We were really wet early right after planting. Went through a pretty good cool stretch. Doesn't matter the company, the variety. We're starting to see it. A little bit of brown stem rot showing up in spots. White mold starting to show up. Got our fingers crossed that we're getting late enough that maybe it's not going to be too big of an issue, kind of yield, but it's still not a good thing. Seeing several hybrids, northern corn leaf white has really came in. Corn got to $3. Guys, just kind of over shut up their pocketbook.
Yeah.
Didn't want to write any more. Didn't want to write any more checks. Some fields, it would have paid. Now it's a standability issue. What kind of stock health do we have out there? Do we need to get out there when the corn's 23, 24%, get it out of the field, get it into the bin and dry it? So now all of a sudden.
So there's my propane bill that I could have spent on fungicide earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying. One thing I'm concerned about on the fungicide use, if a guy's on corn bean rotation with a hybrid that's typically healthy, I'm not big on blankets, fungicide spraying. Some people say it's not ever going to be an issue. Some people do, run into, start to develop resistance on the fungicide thing. So we don't do a lot in our area, probably more on the soybeans than we do the corn, but we're trying to target maybe areas that are going corn on corn or hybrids that are more susceptible instead of doing blanket applications of fungicide in our area.
Well, you don't want to, the whole point is to avoid the resistance.
Yeah.
And that's your plan, isn't it? I mean, how do you deal with disease and what are you seeing in your part of the world?
Well, I'll be very similar to what these guys are talking about, SDS showing up, round stem rot, round spot. I guess the biggest thing for us this year was we had Goss's Will confirmed in Missouri.
Wow.
North Atchison County, and I think there may be a second county maybe on this or shortly. It's not confirmed yet, but that's be the first time in Missouri, and that's not good. There are the options for that, obviously.
There are no options.
And as far as resistance, look what happened to Frog Eye with the Strobies down in what's been going on in Tennessee, and this has been spreading from there. So resistance and fungicides, I wrote an article in today's Farmer about that here not too long ago. And
Yeah.
it's the same as what we've done with glyphosate. We've been using single modes of action. Now we've got co-pack products out there, which are helping, but I do not, and I'm with Joel, a lot of times I don't recommend a blanket application. I'm going out there, we have a scouting program, and we're making those applications based off as needed application. All these products have a curative plus preventative measure in them, so as long as we're catching them once a week, and I think that's the way that the way to go. Now, if somebody's pushing you and they're throwing the kitchen sink at it, by all means, have at it.
Why not? Writing the checks, that's part of it. But that brings up an interesting conversation because we are getting into a different economic situation than we've had the last 5 years. How do you have this conversation with a grower in a way that he's cool with, he's going to be, I mean, you've got enough good examples on the freeze, but we're rolling a few things in that he might be concerned about what you're asking and what he's really getting out of it. How do you make that conversation in your area? How do you do that?
Well, when we talk about it, we want our plant to be healthy as long as we can. You talk about corn. If that corn plant shuts down, that corn's going to stay green or stay wetter on the ear. We have green tissue for that moisture to go back out of that ear. The corn's going to dry down faster in the field. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into being able to survive our sudden death. We have a fungicide out there we've seen where we had a fungicide on there with SDS. We've actually seen them survive a little bit longer, hang on to those leaves a little bit longer. Maybe not see as big a yield loss.
No.
There are some products coming down the pipeline for SDS that look amazing.
Right.
And the question is going to be the price. But when you have those conversations, you got to think about what's best for the producer and what's the long-term longevity of the product itself. And that's what we kind of move on.
Well, and that'd be the concern too with even with the new products for SDS. What's the mode of action? How am I going to put it on? And again, what's the cost? What about from your perspective on disease control?
Well, we have kind of a two-phase because we have wheat, which is a crop that they don't want to put money into. They just don't. So until we scout, we have to really look and scout wheat and make sure it's got the disease so that we can spray wheat. But then on the corn side, they'll just spray it. And so they'll spray, and they tend to do the blanket spraying. But my recommendation has always been, I like to do V5 because just like you, once they get past V5, they're not going. They just start. This is what it looks like. We're going from there. So if we can get some V5 application land, then it's going to be susceptible for gray leaf spot or anything like that. But at least give ourselves a better chance to survive and keep the plant healthy. Yeah. When we lose our humidity and we'll be okay on disease packages. But we've been really focusing on trying to get guys to spray wheat because I think in wheat we have the biggest benefit. From my perspective, we got to keep our flag leaf alive, so we really focus on trying to keep that alive and trying to get that done early. On the corn, other than gray leaf spot, most of our hybrids are pretty tolerant to gray leaf spot at this point, and then we just face Goss's wilt, which is pretty known into our area. So we really look at hybrids that are very tolerant to Goss's wilt, and we really focus on that. That's all you really can do. There's some products out there that tend to say they can control Goss's. They're kind of wishy-washy. Some of them work here, but they don't work over there. So you just kind of have to judge that. But you got to go out there and like I tell most of my growers, let's fight the diseases up front. So let's get resistant hybrids so that we know we can tolerate a lot of stuff. And then if they get bad, then we can spray for stuff. And if we need to do a V5, if there's a hybrid that's really successful for us in the area and is susceptible to certain things, we'll go ahead and do a V5, and then we'll scout the field later and make sure we need to do a tassel program before we do anything else. That way we have just a good shot up front with it. We're like you. We use multiple modes of action, as much as we can on the fungicides.
Have you guys been doing any fungicide in furrow? So we started doing a few treatments last year with the guys that have it set up on their planter. Haven't been able to really come to any conclusions because when we did it last year, we were also cool and wet in the early spring. We thought, if this was the year to do it, this is the year to do it. We'll come fall, didn't see it seemed to be more hybrid specific. An NK hybrid really showed up where the guy had the same field, had the DeKalb hybrid. It didn't show any response to the fungicide in furrow. A lot of the data and the research we've seen behind it has come out of Nebraska. I didn't know if that was something you guys were playing with out
We
there.
actually, we have about 3 tests of that out this year. They look okay. I've had more success with plant growth regulator in furrow or seed treated. That's been a really good success for me. We have a lot of high pH areas in our soils, so we've been looking at products to manage that, because in our high pH areas we grow no beans. And so we've worked on a couple of programs. We have an F-Pro program out that is basically a starter for soybeans that works very well to keep actually the bean alive and grow through the season, and it actually works very well. It's one of the best surprises that we've had. Headline in furrow just hasn't gave us enough bang for our buck. And at when we get down to $3 corn, I just think it's going to probably go away. Like I said, the plant growth regulator I've seen so far has been over 4 bushel, and it's not a very expensive program to put in there. So that might be something that we're going to look going forward, just because you can mix it right in your starter and go like crazy.
What does finding Gosses will do for you, though, in those 2 counties? I mean, for sure 1 county, potentially 2. How are you going to look at that for next spring? I mean, what's that going to change your recommendations?
Well, it goes back to being an agronomist. When the right variety in the right field, knowing what our ratings are, for tolerance. I mean, those ratings are out there. Gospel is nothing new.
No.
Our neighbor states. I appreciate y'all seeing that down, by the way.
Wasn't for me.
But I mean, it goes back to the right product in the
You're
right
sending
place.
Palmer up.
I
I don't have too much to talk about.
I dropped a trainer note off for Joel there in Philly. Bought the seed out of our seed process, and so he can have it. He says he's resistant spider. I guess we'll find out.
There's a challenge.
Except if my boss said when Palmer shows up in the area, he's going to early retirement.
But it just goes back to selecting the right variety for the right acre, and managing that, being on top of it, scouting those acres, and confirming it, not necessarily confirming, but having a plan with that producer that, hey, next year you have it here. Now what are we going to do? Having a plan, having it written down with him, and being in agreement, and provide that service for our producers.
Rotation.
Yeah.
Gosses hasn't been too hard to control. We had a couple fields with that 2-3 years ago. We just changed seed.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it again. So
The seed-
I mean, whatever you do, I mean, there's seed that takes it a lot better than other seed. It just didn't come back again, so it's not been a problem.
I'd say the seed companies have been really proactive in trying to get rid of it. I don't know, it'll never be going away, and probably in another 5 years we'll forget it was here, and then we'll come up with a new hybrid that's totally susceptible to it and kill her dead in a hammer again. But hey, that's kind of, those things kind of happen. That's kind of the fact we live in.
So let's shift to insects for a little bit. I mean, have you guys been seeing troubles with it? Joel, I've got notes here that you've been seeing some grasshopper damage.
Black grasshoppers, actually had guys this year that actually made a recommendation, don't go mow your waterways. You go walk through your waterway and you just see them everywhere. I said, when you mow your waterways, all you're doing is pushing them out into the field.
Okay.
And they're starting to, for the longest time, they were staying small. The last few weeks you go out there, they've gained quite a bit of size. They're starting to do some damage, defoliating some of the outside rows of the bean fields, starting to see some chewing on some pods. Ended up spraying several fields. We go a couple passes around the field with the sprayer, and just kind of, because they work themselves from the outside.
You just work the perimeter.
Yeah, and trying to keep them coming into the field. Last few weeks, we actually started to see several fields of aphids. Last week, we went out with a couple customers some evenings, started scouting some soybean fields. More in some timbery areas, but bad enough. Beans had too much potential to let the aphids take them. We're starting to get late enough. It was hard to make the call, but with the pressure that we were seeing, that your typical signs, walk through the field and you're sliming when you walk out of it. The fields had way too much potential just to let the aphids take them. So we ended up, it was muddy. They didn't want to drive a sprayer to it, so we ended up calling the planes and getting them out there to get them taken care of.
Pretty much the beans in your area probably all look like they have the potential. I mean, you're going to be watching. I mean, there's some beautiful beans.
As long as the SDS kind of stays under control, we have phenomenal potential sitting out there right now.
What about bugs in your part of the world? I'm sure where you are, there's a lot of bugs.
It depends on where you are. For the most part in central Missouri, we've had very minimal bug pressure this year. those aren't Japanese beetles, pardon me. The Japanese beetles, you know, we had a bunch of them. They were cooking silks, getting on soybeans, and you know, we actually had a couple people that sprayed for Japanese beetles. They were that bad. Usually, you know, they're not going to cause too much damage, so they're not getting 60% foliation. So, but we sprayed for Jap beetles. There's some stink bugs out there. There in July when it was really hot and dry, we did go through a dry spell.
Right.
We had some spider mites pop up in certain pockets. You know, we also have aphids as well. We had some grasshoppers, a little bit of everything, but for the most part, we've been very minimal on bugs.
That's cool. You do have the snake bug problem?
We had a few.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. What about your end of the road when it's dry?
We had some weed aphids early, and we sprayed a lot of weed aphid for some aphid stuff. But you know, for the most part, this season it's been pretty quiet, other than the grasshoppers and the grass. But we're just trying to let the grass grow, and we hit them with our pickups. So that's the best way to fire resistance: run them over. Because you know, when the road's crawling with them, you back up and hit them again. So yeah. So if you want to look at the front of my pickup, I guarantee I got 1,000 of them. Well, we will probably end up doing some lower span treatments on the outside realms of fields, especially going to weed if we don't get lots of rain here. Once we get hot and dry, the grasshoppers too tend to take over, and they start moving out of the road ditches and out of the grass pastures, because the grass is starting to die and finish out for the winter. So we'll keep an eye on it, but that'll be my biggest concern going into the fall. But yeah, for the most part, you know, we have so many hybrids that are you know, with all the genetics and everything. We don't really have much for wheat or disease package. We have a lot of sorghum in our area, and it used to be, you know, a lot of green bud looking at, and we don't really look at that anymore because there's so much resistance to that.
There's some new pests coming up for sorghum out of Texas.
That's good. They'll show up that way.
What's it?
Sure can.
Yeah. You know what'd be great? Then we'll plant more corn.
What about your Steve? Any more planting bug issues?
We've been fortunate this year. You know, we spray a lot of aphids, and this year it's been very minimal. Just that's one of the benefits of the ponds. They like those tender beans, and they're all in them ponds, which aren't going to amount to a lot anyway. So the other thing that I've kind of noticed this year is the rootworm beetles. There's been very few of them.
Yeah, I was driving around Iowa last week, and my windshield was clean.
Yeah, there's usually a lot of rootworm beetles. You know, clipping silks and everything. I've seen very few of them this year, which is a good sign.
You know, you made a comment earlier, and I wanted to circle back on it, Jason, and that was that you mentioned about some chemistry coming in that's got everybody concerned. Is this the auxin chemistry? And talk to me about what you guys are planning when those come out, because it looks like 2015 and 2016 will be when we bring out these new kind of chemistry.
Well, we'll see what EPA has to say about that, but I think they're going to be here. I guess from my standpoint as an ag retailer where we have 350 pieces of equipment, we're custom applying, you know, if you think about dicamba 240 and the potential risk that it has for us being a custom applicator and getting in the wrong field for one, tank contamination, you got drift, you got vineyards, you got garbage, you got trees, the risk is on the retailer or that whoever's applying it, whether that's the farmer or the retailer, whoever's doing the custom applying, the risk is on us. And so that is my biggest concern. I do think it has utility from a standpoint as a burn down, both of them. Burn down standpoint, you know, I'm talking the old burn down with dicamba 240 come back and plant. Right. Okay. As far as an in-crop season, in-crop application in the middle of the season, it's going to be hard for me to make that recommendation to go out there and do it, knowing the risks there. And the University of Missouri, Dr. Bradley has done a very good job as well. And you know, the utility for those products for us in Missouri is going to be to burn down, controlling that giant ragweed, that mare's tail before we plant, so we can start with that.
Absolutely.
I don't disagree with you. You know, one of the things that it gives me nightmares is the fact that the farmers are going to lose some flexibility in what they can do. You know, you're no longer going to be able to test some of your hybrids with a side-by-side because you plant a 2,4-D into a Vanville, all of a sudden you've got dead beans, you know, and we've sprayed it and nobody knew it was there. And we have so many of those little side-by-sides going in where guys are putting a bean back into a field just to test beans on beans, you know, or corn on corn, and you can really do some damage. So the flexibility for the farmer, I mean, they're going to have to specifically say this hybrid is going here, and not only are they going to have to market, they're going to have to make sure that their retailer knows where it's at, and they may need to even sit there in the field when the sprayer gets there to make sure they're putting the right thing in there. so they don't hurt things. My biggest concern is hundreds of acres being damaged because you thought it was one hybrid and it was hybrid B, and you sprayed it for hybrid A, and now hybrid B's on the ground.
An auxin isn't an auxin.
Yeah,
It's a dicam, but it's a 240.
Yeah, and
what is the product?
And that's the other thing. The education part of this is they're talking about their products, but they're not. A lot of farmers that you talk to are, well, they're pretty close to the same, so we can mix match. And no, you can't. You might be married to a seed company for an entire year, so if you're going to be that way, you may want to make sure you got the right partner, because otherwise you're going to be in trouble.
Communication's huge.
It is.
With the growers, with us, with everybody, and we've got to know what's there. There's no
Have you
doubt.
started the conversation with growers? Because you know this is coming.
It's coming. I mean, they're going to do it. I know they are, because we're going to be able to control things we can't now.
Right.
And I mean, we've got to know what seed is in what field, and that's the key thing. We've got to communicate that. They've got to communicate with us. And there's going to be issues. There's no doubt about that. But
The biggest thing we can't lose with these new technologies is the fact that it's still going to say so high. On that label, I can only imagine, labels aren't out yet, but it's still going to say 4 inches tall. Maybe, I don't know what it's going to say. I can't say, the labels aren't out yet, but it's still going to be very small. It's not going to bring down those splitters. It's not going to do it. In certain situations it might, but on a consistent basis, this is not glyphosate, okay? The days of glyphosate are behind us, and the thing that we cannot forget is it's not going to control those weeds, but also we can't lose sight of where we've come from. We went away from pre's to Roundup. We've kind of gone back to the pre's. We can't let that go again. The pre's have got to stay in our mix with these new chemistries coming out of that.
yeah, that's the key thing we talked about earlier. I mean, we can't go back to something that's going to get resistant. You can't cut out the pre and say this is going to work. It will. They're going to spend the extra $15 for the pre. They better.
Yeah, they need to. Otherwise, they're going to have we'll be less than 5 years and we'll be sitting up here again going, "Dude, we told you." You did not. What, you didn't watch that show because we were there.
I hate reruns. So that's for sure. I'd like to open this up for questions if you've gotten anything over Twitter on this, or if there's anybody in the room that has a question. I'll repeat the question so that they can hear it on the internet. But does anybody have any questions for the panel from the group out here at all? Yes.
You know, when you talked about applying the synthetic auxins, the companies will say, you have to keep the boom 24 inches above the canopy, only apply from the winds 3 to 10 miles an hour. I mean, that being realistic.
Come to Nebraska pretty soon.
The question, of course, is the requirements of the synthetic auxins and the boom heights and the wind speeds, and what does that mean?
Means that it's going to be more difficult.
Our territory, they're building windmills like crazy. Does that tell you anything about windmills?
I don't know what y'all's problem is. Every time I look at the spray book from an applicator, it always says 5 to 10. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything's 5 to 10.
5 to 10.
We're in highly terraced ground, so to keep the boom 24 inches off the ground is impossible. It'd be great if that would be what it was. So, oh, we lost the mic. There we go. All right. It would be great if we could actually do that. That'd be cool. But the technology isn't there even with the automobiles to keep it.
It's just not fast.
It's just not fast. So who knows in 5 years what it'll be like? But yeah, with the wind, we don't have windmills, but I can tell you this much: we don't, because it blows this way, then it turns around, and blows this way. And the windmills will just get confused and fall down.
You really don't want to see that.
One of the things we're concerned about is tank contamination, sprayer clean out. They're going over the field days that we go to. Just the clean out issues on the cam on the extend side of things. How big a process that really is. And now all of a sudden, instead of having spraying multiple modes of chemistry with our sprayers, to have sprayers just totally dedicated to these 2 sprayers are our 2,4-D fields. These two sprayers are our dicamba fields. So to help alleviate some of the contamination issues, just because it's such a long process anymore. When we got so many acres to spray in such a limited time, spending hours and hours and hours trying to get our sprayers cleaned out, you miss your window.
You also have, as a retail business, you also have the idea of what tanks are we going to put it in. So what products are we going to get rid of that we were using, and we're going to put these new products in, Enlist or Roundup Extend, because they're going to be mixed together, and they're going to make it required to use. So what are you taking out of your lineup to put in this stuff, you know? Because it ain't going to be glyphosate. You're going to still need regular glyphosate for the guys that haven't quite jumped the ship yet or got on board.
Now, Willie, I would say you talked about what we're doing as far as the applicators. We're not waiting on the companies to train our applicators. As far as MFA, we started a week-long training course last year for applicators. Every one of our applicators come there. We'll be doing that again this year. We had science at our field days this year. We had sprayers there talking about spray clean out, talking about nozzle selection, all that. So my company, we're not waiting for the companies to come to us to train our guys. We're going to them and making them come to us to learn, to try to minimize that. We do have a bunch of good applicators that work for us, and they do an excellent job. I would say for the amount of money that the amount of acres that we spray a year, our spray plans are very minimal today, even with the technology we're spraying. And that's with the box on. We don't have the volatility aspect of it. The drift, we see that, and it's happening. But our guys are doing a very good job, and I would say applicators for all of us, they do the best they can if conditions are faced with.
Yeah, and I would say the training has started today. I mean, that's, I won't say that the companies that are putting out the products aren't at least trying to put out what it needs to be happening, because they are. So that's a good thing. At least they're giving you some upfront knowledge of what's going to happen, when it does come. So.
Do I have another question? Anything from? Okay. This has been great. I want to thank you guys for participating. I think we had a good conversation today. Is there anything we missed? Anything you want to make clear from what you guys see in the field before I shut this down? Great. Appreciate your time.
Hold on, one thing.
Yes.
You shouldn't open it up. I got one thing I just want to talk
That's excellent.
about.
Go ahead.
We talked about Barney Hill dwarf and wheat. That seems to be a big thing for us for the past few years. And you talk about that, and they won't go out to fungicide and try to treat that when you tell them it comes in the fall or early spring with aphids. And you got to control that with a seed treatment or an insecticide. So that's something we're going to talk about as we move into the wheat planting season coming up, especially in the area if you've had Barney Hill dwarf in the past. That is brought in on the insect and it's vector to the wheat. So we need to make sure we're treating our wheat with an insecticide and a fungicide package for that matter to try to control that Barney Hill dwarf that we see.
Yeah, that's a fall application.
A fall application, that's correct.
Seed treatment. Seed treatment, and that is an important thing. Look at your seed treatment. Even in the soybeans and in the corn, not a lot of people treat their corn, but it is something that I think may be coming fast and furious down the pipe. Is doing some early treatments on some corn with some different products, because I do think there's going to be some benefits to some of those things. So seed treatments, especially on the wheat side, are huge. And, you have to start your wheat healthy. Once it's up and it's healthy, it can survive a lot, but you got to get it to that point. And with the wheat, with Barney Hill dwarf and some of those other things, it's important to get it out there and get it treated and make sure it's a healthy wheat.
So even your guys who don't like to invest in wheat, they're investing in seed treatments?
Yeah, a lot of them are. And they're a lot more looking at it today. What can I put on my wheat and gain more bang for my buck out of my wheat seed? And that's a big thing. So
great. I want to thank you again one more time. No, I'm just
shut her down before we talk.
No, we're good. We're good. I do want to remind those of you viewing on the internet that you can watch a replay of this at resistancefighters.com, and then we're going to have a little presentation after this. But I want to thank you again, Joel, Jason, Clint, and Steve, for joining us up here. Congratulations on being Resistance Fighters of the Year. But of course, it isn't just for 1 year. The work continues.
Never.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're leaving. I believe it, Richard. So, coming up next, we have two really good presentations for those in the room, and that would be from Gordon Bale, who's a Syngenta technical product lead, who's going to talk about Acuron herbicide, and Eric Tedford, who's also a Syngenta technical product lead. He's going to talk about TrivaPro. Yeah, that's a new one, fungicide, and what that means. So, Gordon, you're going to start first. And I think I'll get down. We're going to let you take this. I'm going to leave here and leave you over here. So
Well, good evening. I'll try to keep everybody's attention. It's a little late here. These resistance fire guys are great. I'd like you guys to come with me everywhere I go, because your setup was perfect for what I'm going to talk about on Acuron. Because you guys are doing the right thing. It's all about the residuals. You talk about everything that's going on in the corn market.
So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but what you heard on the resistant spider panel here earlier was residual herbicides are important, full rate deprees are important. We're seeing it ourselves in our market research. You heard it here. They're using higher rate prees. The days of partial rates are going away, if not gone. I think the days of 2/3 rates are gone. So it's pretty exciting for us to bring a new herbicide that fits right into that mold of residual products. We currently sell a nice portfolio of residual herbicides in Syngenta, and we're now introducing Acuron, which we think will take the residual control to the next level, not only for Syngenta products, but certainly compared to competitive products. So we'll talk a little bit about Acuron for a minute. And what is Acuron? It is a selected corn herbicide. We will be registering it for use in field corn, popcorn, sweet corn, and seed corn. So we'll have use across all those corn crops. It is a premix. It has 4 active ingredients, 3 modes of action, which from what you heard earlier, that's very, very important for the residual control. It's also important for resistance management. The one thing I like to reinforce is that every time you spray a herbicide, you want 2 different modes of action or 2 different active ingredients that are killing that same weed. That's the way you have overlapping residuals. That's the way you have something that's sustainable long term. So that's what we've done with Acuron. So in Acuron, the newest active ingredient is bicyclopyrone. It's a brand new active ingredient that we've been working on for a while. We've been developing Acuron for about 3 years. We've been working on bicyclopyrone for 8 or more years now, and it's something that we've looked at. The strengths of bicyclopyrone are its control of the very difficult large-seeded broadleaf weeds. So you heard some of them earlier. It's the ragweed. It's really strong and powerful on ragweed. The morning glory, the cockleburr. We don't talk a lot about the kochia and the Russian thistle because most of the folks don't have that unless you're in the Western Corn Belt, but it certainly is very, very good on those. So if you look at that product, bicyclopyrone is going to deliver that. Also in the premix of Acuron, we have mesotron, which is Callisto. We have esmetolachlor, which is Dil-2 Magnum, and we have atrazine. So we've got 4 active ingredients in there. And for most of the weeds we're going after, you've got more than one mode of action or more than one active that's actually targeting those weeds. So if you look at Lumax today, some of the weeds that we're typically weak on are these difficult to control weeds like the ragweed, the morning glory. That's where the bicyclopyrone really picks up the activity, and we'll take that to the next level. So that's a little bit about the product. And we've got some technical bullets here as well for you. We do have the product currently at EPA. We're expecting registration by the end of this year. We'll have it in the market in 2015. It will be a little bit limited in supply because we're ramping up production, so the goal is to get it into as many farmers' hands as possible to get the testing so they can actually see the product, see the performance firsthand, and look at how the product will work. So when we think about the performance, and we looked at a lot of trials with Acuron, as I said, the last 3 years, and what we see across all the trials is very consistent control. We see an improved control. I think of all the weeds that we test on, probably the most impressive control is in the giant ragweed. That's the one weed where this product really shines. It does well on cockleburr, a lot of the others, but ragweed seems to be the one. And when we look at trial after trial, we see that Acuron is more consistent than anything we test. And by more consistency, I mean you get a higher level of control more often. And that's what we see with Acuron. So we're controlling more weeds and we're controlling them more often. So we're pretty excited about Acuron herbicide. We think it has a great fit in the marketplace, and we think it's going to do very well opposite where we've seen the evolution of resistant weeds over time. So with that, I'm going to bring Eric Tedford up here. He's technical product lead for TrivaPro. We'll let him get his piece, and then we'll take some questions at the end.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today and talk to you a little bit about TrivaPro, our newest exciting addition to our fungicide portfolio. If you think back some 10 years ago, there weren't many people that used fungicides on corn, and the same pathogens are out there today. There's nothing different there that were out there 10 years ago, but what's changed is the perception that we have about what fungicides bring to corn growers and soybean growers as well. So what that perception is the benefits that we get from physiological benefits along with disease control. What we're bringing to market now, this is not registered yet, but similar to Acuron, it's going to be registered in 2015, is a new exciting product. It's called TrivaPro, not TrivaPro. Our Swiss folks like to have names that can go each way, but Trivapro is the correct pronunciation. And you can remember that because tri is for 3, and there are 3 active ingredients in this product. It contains solatenol, which is our new SDHI fungicide for succinate dehydrogenase inhibitor. And we also have a QOI in there, which is azoxystrobin, and we have a triazole, which is propiconazole. The key benefit of this fungicide, this mixture, is that it's really kind of a perfect mix of active ingredients. And what do I mean by that? It's a blend of a preventive in the QOI, a preventive in the SDHI, and a curative in the triazole. And why is that important? It's important because it gives you flexibility of application. You can go out there and you can have infections that have occurred, the triazole takes them out, and then you have protection with the SDHI and the QOI fungicide. It's also a great benefit because all 3 of these active ingredients have distinctly different modes of action. So what does that mean? It means that they all attack the fungus in a different place, a different location. And that's important, particularly around the discussions we've been listening to tonight about resistance, because it's much more difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's much more difficult to develop resistance to 3 different modes of action than it is to 1, or even 2. So those are kind of the key benefits. We have addition to that, the spectrum, the triazole, the SDHI, which I'll refer to, our SDHI is really good at controlling rust. In fact, it's really highlight is Asian soybean rust, and whereas we don't get a lot of Asian soybean rust here in the U.S., that will be a huge contributor to our colleagues and to the growers in Brazil. So this is really huge, but it does have very high intrinsic activity, so it can be used at low use rates, and that controls other rust as well. So for corn, that's going to bring to us common rust and southern corn rust. And for cereals, it's going to bring the rust that we have there as well. So really a good addition to what we already have. We also get the physiological benefits that we're used to with quilted cell fungicide. And so we're seeing improvements. Very good activity against gray leaf spot on corn and against frog eye leaf spot on soybeans. And in addition to that, as we all know, there's there's an increase in the amount of QOI resistance to frog eye leaf spot on soybeans in the U.S. So this is a further addition to that in terms of fighting that pathogen with 3 combination of fungicides. See if there's anything else I need to tell you. I guess the only other thing is we continue to see benefits above and beyond yield with our fungicides in corn, and what do I mean by that? Certainly we're seeing a lot of benefits in improving harvestability by having stronger stalks, by having plants stay greener longer, and that greener longer actually ties into the use of utilizing the sun's energy to best recognize yields in corn and soybeans and wheat. You know, clearly when you think about yield potential, the best yield potential we have is when the seed is in the bag. And then once you put it in the soil, there's everything working against it. You got insects, you got weeds, you got diseases, you've got fertility, you've got too much water, you've got too little water, and the benefits we're seeing are from those physiological benefits. So we'll still have those, and it'll even be better with our Trivapro fungicide. The one last thing is we have some other fungicides that are coming along with the solatenol SDHI component. I might as well mention to you just so you know. We have Aprovia, which will be registered for apples, grapes, and pears, and that's just solo solatenol. We have Aprovia Top, which is solatenol plus difenoconazole, and that will be registered for the vegetables and cucurbits. We have Elatus, not Elatus, but Elatus, and that will be registered for potatoes and for peanuts. And so with that, we have the pleasure of introducing this family of solatenol fungicides to the market, and I think it's going to have a big benefit to a lot of growers, but it's not registered yet.
All right, so any questions?